All right. Well, hello, everybody. Here we
Hello.
are. MauLer and I, we've started our journey into the world of Firefly, and we've
Yeah.
already covered episode one, the pilot, which is kind of like a feature length episode by itself, which was great fun. I think if you've seen our coverage of that, you'll know that I very much appreciated getting into this. And I think MauLer's enjoyed this little trip down memory lane because he's been a big fan of Firefly for a long time. And this is my first time really experiencing it. So here
Always
we
happy to
are.
rewatch Firefly, especially if it's introducing someone new. It's always fun.
Yeah, well, it's nice to flip the dynamic on this as well. Like, you were sort of quasi guide into the world of Star Trek, and now you're going to help me through the world of Firefly. So it's
Well,
nice to
my
be.
adventures continuing on. I'm still working through the through TOS. I've nearly done season one.
Yeah, that is impressive. Like, I guess it's made some kind of positive impression on you that you were willing to, do this stuff off your own back. So
Yeah, like I said, unlike I think it gets a benefit that other shows don't in the sense that I see it as culturally enriching to watch it as well as entertainment.
mhm.
Like it's really cool to see how they did stuff so long ago, even though I want to kind of go further back as well with like Twilight Zone and see all the influences and see how everyone who made the shows that I loved when I was growing up probably watched that show. And so
Yeah.
it's like, oh yeah, that's how. Isn't that funny to think that like a TOS could inspire and relate to a TNG or other shows that come after it, and then they could inspire like a Buffy, which could inspire like a Doctor Who remake, of course, not the 2005 reboot, which could inspire this, that, and the other thing. And these days, it's, when you have people making the shows that where they're like, oh yeah, I used to love watching like this great show when I was young. We're just like, no, you didn't. There's no way. Liar.
I think I've always had a real thing of like I guess tracing the origins of things. Like it's nice
Yeah.
to with any long running franchise or series or whatever. It's like I always find it really interesting to just go back to that very first episode or that very first season or whatever and just say like this is it. This is where it all began right here with this thing, and this thing was
And
successful
they
enough.
didn't know.
Yeah, totally. Like, I can say like the Resident Evil video game series and go right back to that first one from 1996 and be like, okay, like this crazy franchise that spanned like dozens of games and made billions of dollars, whatever, it all began right here with this one game. And that there's something really cool about that to understand like how much of an influence these things had.
It truly is. And Firefly is, somewhat old now. And so you get to look back at that and be like, I wonder how this influenced things and what came to influence it.
Yeah. And I think with any TV show, I suppose you can have a good pilot, but like if you really want to maintain that audience interest, you've got to then, hit them with a pretty strong second episode to just prove like, yeah, it's not a fluke. Like this is something that's worth your time and you should stick with it. So from what you've told me, like the whole first season was shown out of order by Fox because the studio were kind of idiots, which is unfortunate for sure. But yeah, in the correct running order, this is our second episode, and it's the train job, so they got to do a heist.
Yes, and it's interesting to watch it as knowing this was the pilot for the show originally. So, they tried to form it in such a way that it would work like that, but I don't even know myself if I don't see it at all as the superior choice to the one we watched. Of course,
No, like trying to pitch this as your pilot is a thoroughly retarded idea. It's not that it's a bad episode; it's just this is not how I would kick a show like this off.
No, you get decent information on everybody, but it can't compare to the effort that was put into that first episode. And yeah, I guess they disagreed on, and the studio get the ultimate decision, I suppose.
Lovely people that they are. Well, anyway, should we dive right into episode 2?
I think
Firefly?
so. Yes.
All right. Well, we'll start on 3, 2, 1, go. Alrighty.
It's one of those, because that's the thing. It struck me as an episode that was much better suited as watching everything run as normal until we get to, as people point out, they almost don't want to do this anymore in TV shows, but having the episodes where they just come across a challenge, they get over it, and it tells you something about them all while having some fun.
Yeah.
A lot of shows now will have their main plot line, and every episode adds to that, and then the final episode is the one where interesting things happen.
Well, yeah, we've really witnessed the demise of episodic storytelling, haven't we?
Yep.
It's very much become like season-long arcs, and sometimes I just want like an adventure of the week. It's nice. It's nice to go on these little mini adventures because it gives the writers so much more flexibility to do fun ideas.
Well, and even because when it's a good show, I can't help but believe, like, even that right there, right? He said, I like to live on the edge, do some bold moves, and she counters him immediately. And then Jane says, you dumbass. I assume that's related to he is living edgily. He's doing jobs that could very well be wrong. And then it fucks him over because he finds that out. And then he has to make even more difficult decisions to account for it. It's like, was that a good decision living that way?
Yeah, yeah,
think about that.
So this is like, although this is like just a drunken asshole in a bar, it like does tell us a little bit more about the world that they're part of, like the unification wars.
Well, there's that. There's also the reference later where she says, funny how whenever we're close to Unification Day, you always end up going to an Alliance bar.
Yeah. Yeah, he's sore about this, and he's just up for a fight.
Yeah. Well, he's choosing to go stand right next to this guy.
Yeah, for sure.
We know what he's up to. By the way, really appreciate the dialogue where this guy says it's an auspicious day.
Yeah.
So the audience is like, fucking retard, it's auspicious. And then Jane says, suspicious. What do you mean?
It's the battle of the retards on this one.
Yeah.
I always think this guy looks like a young version of Mike from Breaking Bad.
Maybe he is.
Yeah.
This is where he was before he met up with Gus Fring.
I do love this line as well. That is good.
And then this realization of, yeah,
it's like a whole bar full of these guys.
I didn't find the wall. That's luck.
I love that holographic window. Like, what the fuck?
I guess save smashing it.
Yeah, true.
Such simplistic but effective choreography.
Yeah, it's a barroom brawl, isn't it? Just throw some punches. Nothing too fancy here. And like they're not above fighting dirty as well. She's like throwing dirt in people's faces.
Yeah.
But again, like they're not like all conquering badasses here. Like they get, like they're totally outnumbered and they're gonna get their asses kicked here.
I appreciate that line because they lost.
Yeah.
And that is honestly an underrated line. The implication there, of course, being there may very well be another civil war someday.
Well, yeah. It's very much, it's after the Civil War in America, they would always chant like the South will rise again. So like totally playing on that too.
Well, and I would argue it's just an inevitability. You cannot have, like, we wouldn't expect the Alliance, as they are described in this universe, to control every planet in the galaxy. It's just not going to be able to be maintained. It's kind of what Star Wars tries to deal with.
Well, it's like these outer rim planets are kind of like nominally under control, aren't they? Like they're probably...
it's always got to be an uneasy balance of like, if you don't press your power too much, we'll probably be okay with it. But the second you overstep...
Yeah. Because I don't know if we're going to get this in later episodes, but like I don't know if there'll be a bit of the Alliance having to decide, like, oh, do we want a heavy presence here, or do we don't want to just like have a light touch and send in some specialists to resolve the problem?
Let's put it this way: of all the, let's say there was 100 things they could explore, we get to see like 19, and it's like, oh, cool, we got an episode for this, we got an episode for this. Like, they could have done one for this. And it's like, well, yeah, but they didn't get their 5 seasons, so
yeah. Yeah, it's just the fact that this is a fictional world that's just ripe for so much exploring that could be done. And yeah, you could definitely draw several seasons out of this in terms of just building the world and like, what's the current politics of it? Who's the main factions and how do they relate to each other? How's it going to change over time?
There's a great irony in that had this come out today, maybe it would have been a hell of a lot more successful, and it could have been franchised to the point where they start up another TV show where the main character is an Alliance guy, and you would do other things. But at the same time, had it been made today, I don't know that it would be this. So
no, I don't think the characters would be nearly as interesting if it was done today. No.
Because, yeah, we've gone over how Joss Whedon famously assholey by a lot of people's account. And it's funny, I've seen plenty of behind the scenes that relates to Buffy, Angel, and Firefly. And there was one that was recorded back in the 2000s where he's casually talking about how funny it was. And there was this other writer that's talking about it, that she'd written a script for Firefly, like an episode, and he read it, and he thought it was so shit that he read it in front of everybody, like with the intention of everyone laughing at her, and then she told her to like fix it.
Oof.
And it's the kind of thing that they sort of laugh delivering, and you're like, oh man, I could see that being really fucking hard to deal with as a person. But at the same time, you struggle to properly, like the difficulties of any particular Kubrick film, right? Like the pressures everyone was under.
Well, yeah, for sure. Like famously demanding director.
It's the kind of thing where it's just how much demand are people okay with, depending on what art gets created as a result.
I think it's probably declined over the decades.
We've talked about it. I think I hesitate to advocate for it. However, it seems that we've lost something by more ruthless sets being disallowed.
Yeah, I think, if you took Kubrick from like the late 70s, early 80s, like I think you would have got away with more as a director then in terms of pushing your actors or your writers or whatever.
Telling a writer their work is shit and they need to fix it, as opposed to, yeah, we can try and make this work maybe. It's like that could be the difference between something good and something not. It's harsh.
It is. But then it's like, if you can't handle that kind of criticism and you can't handle the pressure of delivering good quality work, like maybe this isn't the industry for you.
Well, of course, the story I described, what if the writer said that's just what they needed to get the kick up the ass to become a better writer? He'd be like,
Yeah, and this is the thing. I don't want to come across as like I'm defending Whedon here and saying like, oh yeah, you should definitely publicly humiliate your own writers who are just trying to do a good job. But at the same time, you need to be honest with them if they've not delivered something that's up to scratch.
Yeah. There's absolutely a line, and the way it's described, I feel like I would take issue with it. But I guess we don't know the tone of the set. We don't know if he like read it all out in a really spiteful way and wanted everyone to laugh at her, or it was more of a, Evra, what do you think about this line? Do you think it works with this? And then a couple people say like, yeah, no, and then she's like, like something more cooperative.
I think probably the bigger issue with Whedon is like, correct me if I'm wrong on this, like just how he dealt with his actresses. Particularly the young, attractive ones. It's like, okay, you're in a real position of power here. You've got.
Well, he's the one that said he had a lot of trouble. Because it's something fascinating I've thought about as a showrunner with so much power to the point where you can make and break careers with the fucking stroke of a pen. You will have women who are like, hey, you want to have some fun and simultaneously give me a bigger role. And he admitted it was really hard having so many attractive women basically offering everything to him in exchange for roles.
because looking at him, I don't imagine he's the kind of guy who got a huge amount of action in his younger days.
I
Before
think
he
that's
was
something
famous,
even he said. He's like, I was always the nerd, so
yeah. So okay, it's a tricky position, and like I think there's a difference there. It's like, okay, if they've propositioned him and basically said like, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z if you give me more opportunities, and he accepts that offer. It's scummy again, but like they willingly went into that and they were
yeah, I
initiated it
think
versus him forcing himself on someone else.
yeah,
That's
I
totally
don't think
different.
he got accused of forcing himself sexual on anybody. It was more so he was a complete dick.
Right.
With the primary one being the racism claims from Ray Park. Wait, is that the right name? Ray Fisher?
Ray Fisher, yeah.
That's it, yeah. And then, of course, Charisma Carpenter saying that he essentially asked her to abort her baby because it was getting in the way of the script.
Right. That is dickish behavior, sure.
Just for additional context, her getting pregnant was not something like the script had been written for the season. It was for Angel, and her getting pregnant obviously would fuck it all up for the character. She can't be pregnant, so they had to change everything.
There's ways you can usually get around it, like shoot.
No,
from the
absolutely
chest
you
up and
could.
stuff.
They try to get around it story wise, and it's bad. And everyone admits like you didn't have to write it that badly. You could absolutely have written it properly. She's just, it's a fantasy show. She just gets attacked by some parasitic thing that makes her pregnant. Or whatever.
Yeah. This actress here, Morena Baccarin, she got pregnant during the filming of Homeland, and they tried to disguise it, like as I described.
Yeah, there are ways.
I think it mostly worked, but like you could definitely tell that she'd put on weight. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you could tell she was different, but it's like, okay, fine, I get what you're having to work around here. It's okay.
Well, in any case, on that subject, just like I said, I don't believe Whedon's probably working again. That's probably not going to happen. However, the discussion of what is an acceptable amount of pressure to put on your creatives when making something is forever to be discussed, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I think that's quite an interesting one. And yeah, is there a correlation between the decline of that sort of acceptance of putting pressure on people and the general decline in quality of movies and TV shows in recent years?
I think there's something intuitive about it. However, I'm sure someone would say, just because you have a difficult set, that doesn't mean it won't produce some of the worst films ever, and simultaneously an easy set can produce a good film. It's possible.
Yeah, for sure. See, I like this scene between them. I do get the impression he's actually trying to look out for her interests.
Yes.
Yeah, he's not like, oh, I'm ashamed of you or whatever. It's like, no, like if these guys get their hands on you, you ain't coming back. So
well, yeah, Niska seems like very much the kind of character that Mal probably shouldn't deal with.
Yes.
But you can tell it's part of his nature, which I think, like I said, was set up by even that notion with the game he plays at the beginning. He kind of likes the edginess of it, especially if it's anti-alliance. The more rebellious, the better it feels because he hates them so much.
Yeah.
So this is absolutely criminal underbelly sort of thing. But these are not the best people to deal with.
No, I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to enter into a business arrangement with this guy. They picked a great actor for it, though.
Yeah, he's good
really
shit.
Fun.
He feels very much like he'd play a lot of evil doctors.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Like he just needs to like be wearing a World War II German uniform, like this guy.
It's such a classic, the trade heist, you know?
Oh yeah, it's a staple of the Western genre, isn't it? Like robbing the stagecoach or robbing the trains.
Do you remember the one in Breaking Bad, season 5? It's when they managed to actually complete it, and then Todd, he decides to shoot the person who sees them.
Oh yeah. Fucking Todd.
I remember loving that episode when it came out. It was so good. So stressful, and they just managed to pull it off, and then that happens. It's such a dour note.
Yeah.
And by the way, yeah, I really appreciate this logic from Niska. He's like, right, so you know that I'm like a monster by reputation. Just so we are clear, I am a monster. Like so.
Well, yeah, he's exactly right. It's like, I know you're good at what you do by reputation, but like I don't have any proof,
Yes.
really. So let's both prove to each other that we are men of our word.
And then, yeah, that's interesting because it's true. Mal is not the person by his reputation he's trying to build. There are jobs he won't do. And see, that's the logic he's going to have to run with, even though he knows for a good fact that could be an innocent person.
Oh, yeah.
But, I mean, what are you going to do?
Well, it's interesting as well when he says, like, I'm sure he was a very bad person. His eyes just flick to the other guy. Like,
yeah,
I know who you're talking about here.
And see, that part he loves. Yeah, let's take the fucking Anias shit. Screw him. But it's why I really do like Malcolm Reynolds as a character. It's a really great idea. It's clearly a good man who wants to do what is considered bad by people that he believes have inflicted their rule on the world unjustly.
Well, I think Whedon, correct me if I'm wrong, he described Firefly as 9 people who view the world in 9 different ways.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite a neat way of summing this show up. A lot of perspectives at play here. And as a writer, this is what I love about having many different characters thrown together into a mix and having them take on a job together. They each have their different perspectives, their ideas about how to approach it, what's right and wrong. And you can let them spark off each other, and you can do so much fun stuff with that. And throw them together into little smaller groups, like maybe people who don't normally interact with each other, force them to work together. Easy.
And because it goes deep with a show where they really wanted to make it good. Do you know why his name is Malcolm?
I don't think so.
And everyone calls him Mal for short.
Mal is the word for ill or evil or something?
Yeah, the core meaning in Latin would be bad or evil.
Bad, yeah, that was it.
But the relevance of that is, of course, the conflict within him of trying. It's like malformed, malcontent, malfeasance. It's like he's got this a bad side to him. He's representative of something that the show's going to make really clear points of by the time you get to the movie. And it's
like
really
a man
awesome.
trying to like he's sort of swinging between light and dark, he's trying to be on the side of good, but he keeps getting pulled towards the dark
I think
side.
that is totally what we're supposed to take from it earlier episodes, but they're going to make a grander point about it later on. That it makes me value Firefly and Serenity more than just an entertaining TV show. And I can't wait for us to talk about it, but that'll be a decent, 10 hours from
like 2 years.
Well, yeah, what I mean, 10 hours of in-universe. Very interesting. Those two would have this way of connecting with each other when you wouldn't expect it.
Yeah.
Do you recognize these outfits, by the way?
I was going to say that, yeah. They clearly went into the Starship Troopers lot after that movie wrapped. It's like, hey, can we borrow some of your stuff?
I love the effort to be like, well, there's purple on them. You don't recognize them anymore.
You did see this with sci-fi shows back in that time period. Like, you could tell that they borrowed certain props or uniforms from other things and just adapted them a little bit. I don't think it's fine. I think it's
what
you
fun
had to do back then.
Like, oh, look, Starship Troopers.
Yeah.
See, even more enticed now that he can stick it to the Alliance even more.
Yeah. I love how that's his rationale. It's like, yeah, we can really piss them off just by making them look like idiots.
Can I have your share if you're willing to do it for free? No.
I love how she's just so completely forthright about all this stuff. It's like, yeah, so we're going to do like a train heist, and this is exactly how we're going to do it.
I think it just captures the complicated nature of humanity, right? She believes all of these people are kind of good, so doing crime is just like, oh, we're doing something we need to do.
That line there, it's like, we've never done this before, but I think it'll be fine.
Every single scene, they're just taking advantage of the conflicts that are happening between each of the characters' positions and histories.
Well, yeah, and Jane, like, because it's a bit of a running theme in this episode that, like, he keeps thinking that he's in charge because the captain's not on the ship, and it's like, well, everyone keeps working against him.
Like, it's
like, we do not trust you to be in charge, sir.
Oh, and I think that's absolutely interesting in that there are some decisions Jane makes, like, or rather would make, that Mal would make. But if Mal makes them, they have much more trust that it's the right thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it's like, you know yourself, like, when you get to know people, like, if I had to pick between Mal and Jane, like, who would I be more confident leading? Me? Yeah. It's obviously going to be Mal.
Yeah, it's the rationales. You'll know that Mal thought this through, / has a reason he's going to be able to make clear that's not going to disappoint you, or at least you'd hope not.
Yeah. Interesting, the gun that you saw there, that's a British assault rifle. The one that was in the foreground there. It's an SA-80. It's the standard assault rifle for the British Army. Kind of weird to see it in an American show like this. I had no idea how it crept in there.
I actually do imagine that a lot of the material they have is by design scattered from different things because they want to maintain that sense that culture is now melded so hard that it's hard to detect the unification of any particular influence.
I mean, it could well be, yeah. It's a funny idea, like a whole like unit of infantry, like with completely different weapons. Their ammo is like not interchangeable or anything. Like, yeah, okay, fine.
Yeah, no, I can totally understand. You'd want a unified set of uniforms and weaponry, more than likely, with Alliance soldiers, certainly of a particular regiment. Because this, to me, is what TV shows are kind of supposed to be. It doesn't have to be sci-fi. It doesn't have to be Western. It doesn't have to be in this particular way, or even this particular tone, or this particular like action. Just that it's a bunch of very well-established characters having to be put into all kinds of different situations. It's like, what great TV show doesn't really have that going for it?
I know. It's an easy formula.
Well, it's easy. On paper.
Yeah, the sticking point is often the great character part of it. Like, we struggle now, I think, to write good characters. Yeah, it's interesting, like the booby trap that they laid there, it's a non-lethal one. It's just a smoke bomb.
Yeah. They do say later nobody died, which I think it may have attracted the Alliance a bit more to this situation.
Yeah, because it did make me wonder, like, from Mal's point of view, like, would he have been quite happy to, like, just kill all these soldiers here because they're Alliance soldiers? Or is he more like, yeah, they're just guys doing a job. So I'm not really, my fight isn't with them necessarily.
My impression, and obviously trying to limit it to the time we've had so far, is that would be something complicated for him. Like, if it's us versus them in terms of an alliance conflict, he'd probably be comfortable with considering them enemy combatants, and that's the situation we're in. However, if you can avoid it, you probably would take that option. I think this is actually the one thing I'll give to the this episode as an intro that's really awesome is the decision he makes to give back the medicine.
Oh yeah,
it's just very good to have that early.
I mean, I could tell he was going to do that the moment he saw the sick people.
Well, so
out, like, what they were
here's
missing.
an interesting tidbit. Joss Whedon's original intention was for Mal to keep the cargo for the crew, not to sell it to Niska, but not to give it back to the people. And the point of that is to show that despite the fact that he is what you would consider to be a good man, he puts the health of the crew, or rather the status of the crew, above anything else, which is absolutely something that comes through in a lot of scenarios, and I think is a very interesting and strong trait for the character. However, Fox asked him, or rather told him, to have him return it to the townspeople because it'll make Mal more likable to the audience. And it's funny, I actually agree with Fox on this one. Not just in that it'll make him more likable, but I actually think it's more in character for him to give it back to him.
I think the moment you see like young children, like there's even babies, I think, that are sick there, it's going to be pretty a tough sell for the audience to have him just like take that medicine away from them.
My assumption is maybe there's more to this that the original version had, as in less people and less significant illness on the colony, and then maybe the crew members were ill. Maybe that was like an original scripting version.
I think you can maybe work with that a bit more.
And I would have accepted him giving back the cargo and the guy noticing it was 95% full and then recognizing that you gave us 95%. I know it's not 100, but you gave us 95%. That's pretty good, you know?
Yeah, because there's a kind of moral compromise with that guy later, isn't it? Where he sort of recognizes exactly the situation that Malcolm was in. It's like, sometimes a man takes a job and he doesn't see all the details, but then when he does... gives back the things that's owed.
Yeah, no, I really like that. It shows a lot of sort of experience with that character. He understands what happened here. But yeah, I prefer the decision. I think obviously I haven't seen the alternative version, but as it stands, I can't believe that Mal would let all those people suffer. It makes a lot of sense, and I think it really highlights the difficulty of this job for him. I like, even though she's kind of crazy, even she was like, "Fuck you, man." having a moment here.
I was just thinking about dialogue as well, like the bit where Jane talks about the chain of command, and he's like, "As in the thing I'm going to go and get and beat you with until you understand that I'm in charge."
Yeah. Oh, this is again, I think it's very kind of subtle, intelligent writing, right? He gives his story, Mal, and then later, the guy recalls the story to him wrong on purpose to see if he's going to lie or if he can keep his lies straight. And Mal catches it and says, like, "No, that's not what I said. I said it was this." And the guy's like, yeah, you did." But then he also moves on to saying, like, it's weird that you know what you know about this place, but you don't know about the illnesses that are here, and that the guy you were looking for is dead.
Yeah. But then he like Mal almost manages to recover that because he's like, could I take his job instead?
Yeah, it's a really good recovery.
Because you know what, the trap that writers often fall into, and I think partly it's the writing, partly it's the acting. When a character has to try and bluff their way through something, they make it so obvious to the audience that they're lying that it's like, okay, no rational human would buy what they're saying here. But with this, it's like, okay, his cover story seems somewhat plausible, and he's delivering it with quite a bit of conviction. He just seems like a regular guy. And it's like, okay, it works on that level, then that's fine. We just need that level of believability to make this work properly. It's nice to see this actor as well. I don't know what his name is, but I know he was in like the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. He's like Peter's
he pops up.
grandfather.
It's just funny because the second they make all this clear, as the audience, you're like, oh, this isn't as easy anymore. It was fun when we were just stealing from the big evil government we don't like, but...
Well, I mean, again, how many shows would actually go to this level of detail where it's because they would just give you this objective, like, oh, okay, steal these supplies for this bad guy, and like you're probably going to get screwed over, like because it's a typical heist scenario. Here it's like, no, we get a different dimension where it's like, okay, this is actually getting used for a real purpose. It's not just a generic thing that people are fighting over.
Well, and so something that I hope you may be thinking about is we're so joyful and quick to steal from the Alliance. The Alliance are delivering medicine to people who need it.
Yeah.
Like, interesting.
It's, yeah. It's like that thing that they almost touch upon with an interesting idea in The Mandalorian, where it's like, were things actually perhaps better under the Empire, where we had trade and stability and like rule of law?
Oh, God. I feel like we're desperate in our culture for any story to portray that somewhat instead of the goofy, idiot, evil government. It's so boring at this point. Like, oh yeah, they want to drink the blood of babies. You're like, okay,
yeah.
Because I think they do a good job of that because that's in your head, and then you get the Alliance scene where they're like, they've lost the medicine. It's like, what are we gonna do about it? It's like, they're gonna come back. We got other stuff to do. It's like, oh,
yeah,
okay. It's like,
but again, they're right because it's like, well, a batch of medicine that goes missing somewhere. It's like, okay, it's like we're a major military force. We've got bigger issues to deal with here.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but what can they? We're not going to send a force down. He says it's the job for like local sheriffs and stuff.
Yeah, and he's right. Which again, it's like what Andor touched upon, where it's like the Empire only get involved when it's serious shit. That makes sense. They've only got so many resources to patrol a whole galaxy.
I really love how this cuts off too, because you don't know what's happening at first.
I could kind of sense like he's been doped up with something. Like he just slowly gets more incoherent.
You can't change that by getting bad days. Like getting what? Like... Another thing I think is deliberate is the fact that Simon didn't prepare to grab him. They just let him fall.
Face first into the deck, please. It's a really loud noise as well. It's great because he sort of redeems himself later, where he's still like semi-retarded, but he's still shooting people.
Dude, I love the fact that when Mal gets on the ship, he's just been dropped on the staircase. They're like, we tried to get him to the infirmary, he's just heavy. He's just murmuring random shit.
Well, hello.
I really like Zoe here have no clue what the fuck's going on. But she's like, what would your husband say? She's like, I was weak. I don't really know what's happening. Like,
yeah, let's just go with that.
It's a cool recognition of how much they want to cooperate. They recognize, like, okay, so she must have a plan here. I guess we're going with it because we got no other choice. And yeah, she has official records that actually clear this pretty easily, so...
Yeah, this is like perhaps one aspect where I might have liked a bit more clarification of what her, I guess, powers and authority are.
Funnily enough, it might be the next episode. We get a whole episode about her job.
Because, like, yeah, clearly it's quite a unique thing that doesn't really have a point of comparison in our own world. Because, yeah, when you look at things like, you know, escorts and stuff, they're not looked upon favorably.
No, yeah, society. I think it's supposed to be a bit subversive because you have so many people who respect her role, and yet Mal describes her as a whore. And it's like, so how is this happening? And it's like, yeah, it's a particular high class business arrangement that certain cultures, certain planets have respect for, but others don't.
Right.
And yeah, I think it's episode 4 you get a bit more on here specifically, because you know the way this works in these sorts of TV shows. You have like POV episodes that are much more about an individual character instead of the group.
Yes.
And I'm not even kidding, man. Like that format needs to come back because it's so good.
It's completely retarded.
But yeah, an
Yeah,
episode that gives a lot more time to a supporting character, so we get a really good understanding of them, and then that sits with us going forward for every last line they have. You know.
well, that's why the episodic format facilitates that so much better, because you've got like a little bit of a blank slate with each episode. You don't have to
mean, some of
necessarily
the-
push the overarching story forward with everyone.
Some of my favorites from Farscape would be considered POV episodes, I would suppose. Like the one with the history getting revealed of Aaron having killed the previous pilot. You would call that an Aaron and pilot episode, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it's really
Is
good.
that the way we weren't? Is that what that
I
one's
think so,
called?
yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I think it's really well done, that episode, but I love how bold it is.
Oh yeah, like they're
super
fully on board with the whole, like, Erin was kind of a monster, like when she was a peacekeeper.
Hmm. You can tell he's like, what the fuck? Like,
a fucking knife stuck in me. Yeah, I mean, I think obviously if this had been a modern show, I'd probably imagine they would have gone for more complex fight choreography, because it's fairly simplistic.
very simple, yeah.
Yeah, it's
the thing you need to take advantage of is little bits like this, where you're like, wait, who fired that shot?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, neat, yeah, he was there the whole time. And you get a little bit of fun out of it. It's like, yeah, as long as it can pull that off. And everyone working together, a bit of stress.
I almost expected him to say, "I was aiming for you." Like, it's neat as well. It shows the sheriff having a bit of wherewithal.
Yeah, you could tell he was figuring shit out to begin with. He's not a stupid guy, but he's also not stupid enough to not know what's happening here. You could tell they give him a shot of just he's realizing the situation's like, you were trying to steal from us, but now you regret it.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of men would just be like, fuck you, you get it imprisoned. But I like that he says here, like, you got more information than you chose.
And then that line from Mal saying there was no choice. Like,
nope,
I had to give this back.
I think when I was bringing up Firefly to Az, he referenced this as one of his favorite moments.
It is really good. It's how he just repeats the same line to the next guy.
Yeah. He's doing his like a standard villain monologue that's threatening and scary, and then Mal's like, "Oh well."
Oh, yeah. Into the engine with you.
It's such a great combination, right, of having a bit of fun, but also this is Mal basically being like, "You've made clear you're unmovable. I believe you."
that guy just caves instantly. Yeah, it's best for everyone.
You know, it's just great. Yeah, let's do this. Let's break some bread here. And yeah, just again, constant subversions is what they do, and I think a lot of them work. But the whole like, I've had worse wounds than the fuck.
Yeah. I did like the moment where he takes that knife to the chest there, and he just properly shouts out like, "Ah!" Like the fuck.
It just, I think it works a lot because I think a lot of people would be like, like The Rock. I could see him being like, I'm not going to yell like that. But
yeah.
I think to people like us, like that's probably how I would do it. I'd be like, yeah,
like fuck.
And yeah, I think Nathan Fillion, in combination with the character who's written like Malcolm Reynolds, is absolutely sort of representative of the average man. It's just taken to very difficult elements, and then his principles are rock solid but complicated. And again, another thing you need to do with episodic TV is make sure you're maintaining that overall story. What is going on here? Who are these guys? They seem a little scary.
I love how they say 86 million miles as if that's really far. Like,
yeah, they should have kept that.
It's like from here to Mars or something. It's really close.
Maybe they colloquially meant light years. I don't know.
It's fine. Like it's. I think a lot of this takes place within one solar system as well. So like, there's lots of planets, but they're relatively contained within a small space. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and we don't have a strong understanding of the world building. Nothing contradictory necessarily, just nothing super padded out, which I think they would have done if they'd had a lot more time.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, these guys are not coming from like Earth as we know it. Like I don't know if Earth like even exists in this.
Oh yeah, I think we're safe to assume. I think they call it the Earth that was. That's the name of the planet now.
Yeah. So it's like that's kind of like all used up in terms of resources and stuff. And I guess humanity is like spread out into the galaxy to colonize new worlds, and that's why we have what. Well,
and I picture they're a particularly high class and covert. They like members of the Alliance that there's probably many of, but they're this sector's set.
Yeah, but that was episode 2, and like, yeah, my impressions of the show so far. Just really enjoying it. I think for something that's over 20 years old, things of that era, you quite often expect it to be very dated and a bit cheesy, and maybe just something that's not aged very well. Whereas with this, I'm just having a ball with it. I think it's really fun. I think the character work is great. The dialogue is often very insightful. It conveys a lot in a short space of time. And I think there's so much to be said for that kind of economical, efficient screenwriting. We just
it is a reality of how all this works, right? That you and I have got a huge library in our heads of things that we've seen, but sometimes we don't realize the information we have is not the same as everyone else's. So discussions surrounding Joss Whedon, like I come at it from, oh man, the creator of Buffy, Angel and Firefly, and Avengers doing all this stuff. That's kind of crazy. Meanwhile, for you, it might be the guy who made those shows that I haven't seen, also Avengers that he was a part of and kind of tanked the MCU with in future in a form like we discussed. And so it is curious to see if you were to watch all of this and then eventually maybe someday, hopefully, get around to Buffy and Angel, I wonder if it would change your mind about a person, because I think that's an inevitability a lot of the time with artwork. And it goes both ways, right? Like the artwork can be amazing and the person can be horrible, and then it will affect the artwork.
I think, I would liken it to, say, someone like Muhammad Ali, right? Say all you knew of him was like watching his last few fights when he was old and he was beginning to suffer from Parkinson's, and he was not a top fighter anymore. You would think, oh my god, that guy was so fucking overrated, and like it was just kind of embarrassing. And then suddenly you're shown like him in his prime, you know, when he's taken out Sonny Liston, whatever, and like, oh, okay, right, yeah, I begin to see where he got his reputation from.
I've said before, even if Joss Whedon did return, I would not want him to make any more Buffy or Angel or Firefly, really. You'd be like, wait, what? Like, isn't he the only person that would? And it's like, that's true, but he ain't the guy who made these anymore.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the work he did. It's just that, you know, we moved on. A lot of time has passed. A lot of insights and values have changed.
That I guess that's the other issue, isn't it? Like, say even Joss Whedon was the same creative mind that he was back when he did shows like this. You know, do you think the culture in Hollywood and like the culture of filmmaking would allow for shows like this as we've seen it?
So not only do I think that you'd be right to point out that he wouldn't be allowed to, he would be encouraged by what would actively be his friends to not do it. He wouldn't have the capacity to like make the show as it is. So much of this show would be CG and lazy. No offense to any particular people that may work on it. It's just that it would be faster and it would be more common. So you're not going to get the same vibe whatsoever. Then, of course, as we know, like I've watched the last show he did that he properly worked on as a show that was essentially his was The Nevers, and it's not as good as Buffy, Angel, and Firefly. It just isn't. It's got some DNA in there that you can appreciate. I quite like a lot of the dialogue in it. I like some of the characters, but you know, I watched the season and I was like, this was okay, and maybe something I could recommend, but certainly not before these three. And I think he considered Buffy and Angel his experimental years, and to me, they're his best years. Like I do think Avengers is very good as well, though, the 2012 one.
It's it just makes you wonder, like, when people reach their creative peak, is there just an element of, okay, some of your best ideas, you've used them up, and like maybe you're going to start declining now in terms of like your imagination, your ability to write witty dialogue, great characters, all that sort of thing is gradually going to start to fade just as you get older. And that's a sad thing to face up to, but I suppose it happens to everyone.
Well, yeah, and we'll probably have a few more conversations about this as we progress. I plan to talk through almost all of Buffy with Gary at some point, not as we're doing this, more so like streaming per season, but I assume we'll have to talk about Joss Whedon's legacy here and there. I'm not even sure what it'll look like in 10 years from now. Will it be this? Because I feel like people are a bit more soft on him compared to even 5 years ago when it was all happening. You know, he was considered like one of the worst people in the world. And I think in retrospect...
I think with time, like, I'm not going to say it heals all wounds, but it definitely softens your...
I think as part of the Me Too movement, of all of the things everyone was getting accused of, you know, there were people who were doing way worse shit.
Yeah.
Obviously. There's like the famous main boss of the Me Too people.
Exactly, yeah. And if his thing, if his worst crime was just being a bit of a dick, like, well, okay, I can live with that.
I think there was lots of vague statements made by some people, which is really unfortunate when it comes to allegations, because it makes people wonder in terms of like, what do you mean when you say, you know, he was a bit of a tyrant on set, and does that relate to anything, you know, very, very unbecoming, to be as subtle as possible? And that person who's making, you know, the vague allegations might be like, I'm not going to say anymore. And it's like, oh. So, you know, people wonder.
But I think, in terms of my perception of Whedon's body of work and like what I think of him as a creative, like, it was nice to actually watch this show. And I think probably the more I watch it, the more I might warm to him a bit more.
So that was actually what I was going to bring up, is that I feel Buffy, Angel, Firefly, they will be shared as time goes on through generations, much like a lot of media that people love. And that, you know, it's just going to be impossible for people to be like, who was this made by? It's like, oh, that guy. Who is that guy? It's like, oh, huh. Maybe he wasn't so... I've seen people in chat before say, is there any shot at him ever working again? I was just like, no. I don't think so.
And that's the thing, because, like, there's two levels to this. On the one hand, like, if everything we've said is the case, and like really, like perhaps he's been a bit unfairly maligned in terms of his public perception, then just watching this will definitely help my like appreciation for him as a filmmaker and a creative. And I think over and above that, there's also the element of let's try and separate the art from the artist. Like,
oh, absolutely. If he turned out to be the worst person in the world, I don't think I'd want to allow that to drip into these shows, especially because he wasn't the only person who worked on them.
Well,
we've got a lot of talented writers on here.
Exactly, yeah. And like to sort of say, like, well, because this guy was an absolute monster or whatever, that invalidates the work of all the actors, the other writers, the creatives and stuff who helped to make something that was actually quite special and really good quality. That's unfair. It's like unfair guilt by association. So I don't want to go down that road anyway. But yeah, I mean, hopefully we'll continue to have a good...
2 episodes in, though I'd say technically 3 episodes in because of the way this got released. It's 14 when it almost feels like 15 was the original number and they combined episodes 1 and 2 or something.
Yeah, and I think that's fine, like to start with a bang. And like I enjoyed that pilot. So yeah, I'm enjoying Firefly so far. Looking forward to the next episodes. Hopefully it should be good fun as well.
I believe it will be.
Well, for everyone that's joined us for this, thank you. And hopefully you got a bit of entertainment on us going on a little trip down memory lane for you guys. And hopefully you can also join us for the next one. But for now, that is all we've got for today. So go away now.
Bye.